Welcome to 85%. This is my name is Mark. I'm your host, and this podcast is dedicated to the combination of volunteer departments out there that make up 85% of the fire service. So a lot of times, rightfully so, we focus on the bigger departments because they have a higher call volume, or they have the money to push the various agendas that help keep us safe and everything like that. But I think it's important to look at the volunteer fire service, which makes it's the backbone of the fire service. And so this is my first show, so I thought it'd be great to invite Jim Duffy on here. I'll let him give his bio, but I know him as he was a division chief for Wallingford, Connecticut Fire Department. When I met him, and disclosure, I do work for the Clarion Group also. That's my day job. And I did a series of videos with Chief. And we'll probably talk about that later. But he's just one of my favorite people in the world. And I thought he'd be perfect person to get on the show, the first guest, because I think he has an amazing outlook on life. I think he's a proactive leader. He's just a perfect example of what the fire service should be. But I've never actually delved into his volunteer career before, so I thought it was a perfect opportunity to that. So, Chief, welcome, and thanks for being here. And if you could please run through your actual bio, if you wouldn't mind, starting with the volunteers.
Okay, I'm going to be very, very humble here, but my dad was a volunteer where I grew up in a town called Mineola on Long Island, which is just over 10 miles from the city line. So Queens, actually I was born in Queens, but my folks moved 10 miles further out to Nassau County, and my father became a volunteer firefighter in 1962. So watching him run out from dinners and go to calls, sometimes right around the corner, and would watch him work at fires in our neighborhood. It was pretty amazing to me. When I became 18 years old, I joined the volunteers. And it wasn't like I didn't think of it all the time when I was a kid. I didn't say I want to be a volunteer, but I became a volunteer in Mineola, New York, which is amazing because it's still all volunteer and it's such a densely populated area. They just put in a couple of 10-story buildings, but still all volunteer. Long Island I think there's only one career department on Long Island now, and it's actually a combination department. What's happening there, and I'm going to get away from my bio for a little bit, is a lot of the volunteers, because people work during the day, they commute to the city or elsewhere, they're putting on daytime drivers or daytime EMS people as career. So there'll be a career paramedic in firehouses and things like that, because it's getting more and more difficult to manage going to daytime calls for the EMS, because the numbers of EMS calls are pretty crazy, as you well know. In most places, it's 80% of the business of the fire service. So anyway, I was there 16 or 17 years. I became a captain there. And how I became a career firefighter, or why I became a career firefighter, I loved what I did for a living, and I loved being a volunteer. But I made a grab. I made a rescue. Myself and a friend of mine, Gary, we made a rescue in an apartment building. And it changed. It's all I wanted to do. So I started testing in upstate New York, Connecticut, and the like, because I was already 29 years old and you couldn't take the test for FDNY. So I took a few tests and I scored pretty high on most of them, but in Wallingford, I scored number 2. And I became a career firefighter. And Wallingford was and is a combination department. There were three volunteer companies that ran with us. They had their own firehouses, their own equipment, and we worked together. They would go to calls, we would go to calls. When I first started there, our relationship wasn't so good. You know, the volunteers thought we were only in it for the money, and the career guys thought they were scabs. You know, so but under the direction of a good chief, we started training together and working together, and it became a much better organization. But volunteerism has fallen off there. There's very few volunteers there anymore, and most of the work is being handled by the career people. But don't get me wrong, the volunteers are still going, depending on times of day and what kind of call it is and the like. Like you're in a volunteer department, more people when the words come, a structure fire, every volunteer shows up.
Yep.
When it becomes Mrs. Smith not feeling well, only a few people show up, you know? So you understand that.
Yeah. Tones go off for a fire, and people you haven't seen in like 3 years show up. Like, oh, who are you? You know?
Just going to quickly get back to why Mineola and Long Island does so well, or part of the reason the tradition is so strong on Long Island. But second to that is there's a lot of off-duty New York City firemen and New York City cops and New York City EMTs that live on Long Island. So they volunteer in their hometowns when they're not working in the city. So it gives you an experienced workforce and more people available during the day, because if you're working a night shift as a cop or a firefighter, you're available during the day. So it helps keep it surviving, although they are having their issues too, like the rest of the country.
It's unfortunately the world has gotten faster, you know, and so people, I don't know. This is my theory, is that, I mean, the hamster wheel that we are all on is just keeps going faster. So there's less time for volunteerism these days, I think.
Yes, and I don't have facts to back this up, but I think some of it is culture. I think people aren't so into their communities anymore. They're on social media. They're playing games, you know, Mortal Kombat or things like that. Even things like the Little League, they have difficulty getting coaches and umpires and things like that. The Knights of Columbus, people aren't stepping up. That's part of it. I don't think the communities are as close as they were. Like when I was growing up, the volunteer fire department was a big deal. You know, and very politically strong in most communities as well.
Mm-hmm.
And I think some of that's going away.
Yeah, I think you're right. I'm really lucky. So I didn't mention this earlier, but you mentioned it, so I volunteer on beautiful Anderson Island, which is in Washington State, and it is a community of 1,500 people, and we have about, you know, anyway, it's like 25 volunteers, and we have four we have paid chief, paid assistant chief, and two other paid people in the department. So it's, I guess, considered a combination, but you know, it's primarily volunteer. And because, you know, I heard this saying 6 months ago, and it was, one fire department, one fire department. And I didn't hit me until I was joined here, and I realized how unique we are. And, your department's unique. Everyone's very unique. And in some ways we're like, I feel like I'm living in the 60s, because we have this little department, and it's a fantastic place. I love going there. All the volunteers go there, and we have everything from, a 16-year-old up to, I think our oldest, he's 85. it is just a very community oriented thing. So I feel very lucky where I am. And I would imagine most fire departments are that way once you get into the group that's there joining. But I think it's changing, and I not necessarily one of my. I was just because something we were going to talk about later, but one of my pet peeves is that people say, "Oh, people these days," and I'm like, well, I'm different than my dad's generation. You're different than your dad's generation.
Yep.
Our kids. It's just the way life is, and it's our job as the elder statesman now to figure it out. It's not their job to figure it out. I mean, it's their job to be there and involved, but we're the experienced ones, so we should be the ones that reach down and nurture them. I don't know. I probably didn't say that right, but
you absolutely did. And I look at it now where people are saying what you're saying. They're different. When I joined the volunteers, where my dad was a volunteer, I was one of those young kids, long hair, wasn't really, even though my father was a member there, I really wasn't welcomed by some of the older folks. My hair was longer. I was, a product of the 60s and 70s. I joined the fire service in 1974. So we were different. A lot of them were just coming back from Vietnam. Some of them were in Vietnam, just as it was closing out. So very, very different. And today, I'll give an example of what you're saying. We learned from the older guys. We never had formal training. Basically, they said, here's your boots, here's your coat. Fire school is in May. Until then, just follow the senior guys around and they'll tell you what to do. That was pretty much it until I went to fire school, and I could get on the trucks and go to calls, which was crazy. Today, firefighter 1 minute, there's a lot of demands on the volunteers as well. And there should be. Training should be important. It's the backbone of the fire service. If you're not trained, David said something the other day about search. If we're not training to search, what are we here for? And I agree that editorial was so on point. People saying, well, it's not safe. Well, you know what? Nobody said the fire service was safe. We do it as safely as possible, and as efficiently as possible. We can't say, well, we're not going to search because I might get hurt. Well, if we're trained, we probably won't get hurt. If we're not training, we could get hurt.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Let me. Oh, wait. So we finished with your bio?
Yeah.
Let's
you know
see.
what?
Oh.
I made it up to battalion chief, the shift commander of my shift, and I retired 5 years ago. And now I'm traveling around doing some instruction, going to FDIC, which I absolutely love. And you're a huge part of that. And thank you very much. And Clarion and fire engineering, it keeps me excited, even though I'm not doing the job anymore.
Yeah, not to get off sidetrack, but that's my favorite. My favorite thing to do is, I think, me, I'm kind of an introvert. Like I probably talking more today than I've talked in months. My favorite thing to do is sit around and listen to you and whoever you're talking to, just talk the fire service, because I learned so much during that week. And just in general, just because I don't know, so much amazing knowledge that week. Just you have so much knowledge in general, but
no. You know what? Compared to the people that you're hanging around there, I'm like, I just talk too much.
No. Okay. I think I got bio. This is my set of questions here. Let's see. So tell me, do you remember your first call when you volunteered?
I absolutely do. And I almost quit because of it.
Really?
I'll tell you two different stories. I'll tell you the first fire call I went on, but it wasn't my absolutely first call. The first fire call I went on, it was this second floor apartments over a restaurant. And, so I went up there. My bell went off because the old SCBA had bells at the back. It went off. I let go of the hose and I started trying to get out, and I couldn't see. I got lost. And my captain, Lou Santos, I'll never forget this man. He reached out of the dark, never saw him. He grabbed my hand, put it on the hose. He said, just follow this out. So my
Wow.
first fire was a very big learning experience. But the first call I went to was a car accident around the corner from the firehouse. And it was awful. It was a car fire. People were burned in the cars, and gasoline was burning on the street with victims in it. And I was like, whoa, this is really not what I was expecting. I was expecting house fires and, but I'll never forget that. It was pretty overwhelming for me.
Wow.
Yeah.
So how old were you again at this time?
18.
18. Wow. Okay.
And again, never envisioned this. It was very shortly after I got, went, yep, I swear I'll do everything I'm supposed to do.
Wow.
Yeah, it was pretty overwhelming. But my dad talked to me, the senior men talked to me, and said, this is very unusual. You're not gonna deal with this on a regular basis. We weren't even they're still not EMTs there. I mean, some of them are, but they respond. There's an ambulance that goes to the calls.
Mm-hmm. Oops, sorry. Turn my phone off.
That's okay.
Wow. So and not to get off a different subject, this reminds me of, so our little tiny department, we had I wasn't on this call, but my daughter, who was 18 at the time, we have a little lake here, and we had a drowning a couple years ago. And it was awful. And she, same thing, this poor person, they made it off the island alive, but they later succumbed to their injuries. And she's 18, right? I think about me, I'm in my 50s, and same kind of corollary. I mean, she just sort of dove in, and she's a wonderful young lady. And now after that, so this kind of goes into a little bit about today versus yesterday. And you kind of alluded to this. This is one of my questions about how we see today. And after this happened, our department, because we didn't know how to deal with it, right? So we sat around, we talked about it. We tried to do the hey, we're going to help each other out. We're going to talk about this and kind of get through it together. And there were a few really young people on that call. And then we were like, well, what are we doing? I may have actually called you at this time. I can't remember. I think I called Dan DeGrice and said, hey, what do you know? So, and we called some local resources, because I think today's department, this gets into my thing of, I think today's fire service, when you talk about like, people are all in with the fire service, but today I think people realize that you need a little more balance, and you need a little more like mental health and things in order to have a long career, or to enjoy it. And so like today, last year, when this happened, or 2 years ago, we pulled in as many resources as we could. When you had your first incident, you talked to your dad, which is probably the best thing that could have happened right there. I'm guessing, but I don't know which is better or worse. But I think today there's a lot of focus on that work-life balance, and which is weird in the volunteer service, because it's not work, it's volunteerism, life balance, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, but you know what? I think in the volunteer service, and I see this a lot, And I'm going to give you a quote my wife said to me one time when I ran out and went on a call. I came back and she was a little perturbed because there was a family thing going on. And she basically said I should have married the fire service with the explicative before fire service. I was the captain of the company, so you get a little over involved. It's your second job. It's not your livelihood. And a lot of people, both career and volunteer, go overboard. You got to have, I hike, I fish, I do stuff. I know you boat, and all those things are important. But in a lot of volunteer firehouses, the people who move up, they get sucked in, not in a bad way. You need to be involved. You need to be active. But getting to the mental health part, the first time I found a dead body in a fire, my lieutenant called my mom and told her about it because we didn't have anything. Went home from the call, you cleaned the hose, the medical examiner took the body away, and we went in a firehouse and, we talked about where I found him and blah, 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 blah. But there was nothing. There was zero. Joe called my mom and told her what happened and that she should keep an eye on me. That was the whole fire department conversation for me. Today,
Wow.
and I'll give you an example. The next town over, we actually share a school district with the town. They had a fatality. A grade school child died in a fire. Before the day was over, the state critical incident stress team was at their firehouse, and I drove by over the weekend and I saw that the parking lot was filled. That's probably what was going on. I don't know that, but we immediately take care of our people. And I think it's really important for many reasons. I don't think we're, God forgive me for saying that, as strong as we used to be. We're not giving our children the coping skills when they become young adults. And people are having more. And the burden of being alive today is there's so much stress. And the mental health has to get moved to the top of almost everything we do. In the fire service, the police department, even everyday life, being a mom in today's society with social media is so difficult. So I think we're moving in the right direction. There are so many people talking mental health today. Are all of us taking it seriously? I don't think so, but we need to. We need to watch out for each other. We always did, but we did it our own way. We made fun of them. Oh, this bothers you. We would poke and, but we loved them, but we didn't
Yeah.
know how to do it properly.
Yeah. I'll be really interested to see. Hopefully I'll live to see it like when my grandkids volunteer, because now that my daughter's a volunteer, I'm sure that she'll have her kids volunteer too. I have a feeling it's like one of those things you can't get out of your blood. I wish I would have found the fire service 30 years ago. I was lucky enough to find you and your friends when I started at Penwell at the time, because it was a great introduction to the fire service. But I wish I would have found it 10 years. Of course, if I would have found it at 25, they wouldn't have hired me, I don't think, or I would have been kicked out of the volunteer department because I was not ready. But anyway, sorry. Okay. So I've found that when you meet people that have been in the fire service for any length of time, they always have like one or two calls where you're like, there's no way that happened. And without addressing any HIPAA issues, what's the craziest call you ever went on?
Oh,
as a volunteer?
As a volunteer. Ooh. Oh,
Okay, it could be either. It could be either.
Let me think. Yeah, there are a lot of different calls as a volunteer. I learned pretty much on the job. But I'm going to tell you the most strangest thing that people will never believe. We had a call. We got called for a car into the back of a tractor trailer, under the tractor trailer. So there's no HIPAA. So we have a couple of highways running through our city in Connecticut where I worked, and we went to accidents all the time. Many of them awful, many of them extrications. But we get to this, and we're all expecting the worst, into the back of the truck. So we get there. I was in the car, and my lieutenant, Bobby, he went up and he's talking to the guy in the car, it's up to the trunk underneath the tractor trailer. And he's talking to the guy. Is you hurt? No, I'm not hurt. So what happened? This guy drove into the back of the tractor trailer. It took like the hood, the seat laid back. So he was actually laying in the seat in the reclined position with the roof right in front of his face. So Bobby actually got him. He crawled out himself and came out the back window. But what happened, he hit the back of his truck. The truck driver never knew it happened. He was driving down the highway. The truck felt weird, but he drove probably 3 or 4 miles, and somebody was beeping the horn, pointing at the back of his truck, and he pulled over, and there was a car wedged underneath his truck. So there was an accident. The truck driver drove several miles, and he didn't even know there was a car underneath his tractor trailer. That, to me, it's a story you would never believe. And the guy was unhurt.
That's crazy. Everyone walked away.
Yep. So that's a good
awesome
thing.
That's a great story. I love it. Okay. So if you had today's advice for a volunteer that walks in to your station today, and they're like, "What's this all about? What would you, if you could summarize it in a few minutes, what would you tell a volunteer today?"
Wow. If he was just thinking about becoming a volunteer, I would say every day that you go to the firehouse, it will be exciting. You won't go home disappointed. You'll go there excited and go home thrilled about what you're doing. You're part of something bigger than you. And again, it's going to depend on the organizations. Every organization isn't warm and friendly and inviting. I would tell them to be humble. Talk to the older guys, the senior guys. And I don't mean older age-wise, but guys who've been around. Ask for their advice. Learn from them. Be careful. You might be excited, but understand that you know very little, and keep going. You know what? You're part of an incredible brotherhood, sisterhood. They will become your friends for life. I still go down to Mineola where I was. I go, try to go to their picnics. I go to meetings sometimes. I teach there. I share my time with them. I go to their firehouse and I do classes. And I've been out of there since 1990, and it becomes a wonderful part. And it's not for everybody. If this doesn't work for you, it's okay. Don't feel like you're a failure. It's become a part of it. Be active. Don't be sitting on the sideline, but don't get in over your head. Does that make sense? Learn
absolutely. So I always tell people, like, the volunteer, because I was the same way. I'm like, gosh, I should be there. Like a call goes off and I'm doing this or I'm editing something for work, and I'm like, and people come to me the same thing, and I always tell them, well, when the tones go off, if you can come and be involved, please do. If you can't, don't worry about it, because I think that's somewhat what you're getting at. But sorry, I interrupted you. Go ahead.
No, that's okay. This is a conversation.
Yeah.
It's been a long time since I've been a volunteer. I understand the volunteer service. I also see that sometimes responses are delayed and that minimum manpower on calls. That I think where I worked, we were understaffed. But in the community I live in, it's 26 square miles, and only a few thousand people live in the town I live in. The guys are great. If there's a fire in the town I'm in at 6 o'clock in the evening or 8 o'clock in the evening, there's plenty of people, and they're well trained. They're very well trained. They do a great job. But Tuesday at 10 a.m., the numbers are going to be low. There's automatic aid, mutual aid from other communities, but they're now 8 miles away. And then the next mutual aid is, so most volunteers in this country are operating at a very, very minimum level, not because of training, again, because of manpower. I was up in the Adirondacks. I don't know if you know anything about the Adirondacks this summer, and I stopped by the firehouse, and the youngest member is 60-something years old.
Wow.
And I'm looking, this is mind-boggling. It's basically a resort community. Kids move away from there. They go to college and they don't come back. And it's scary. Again, they have a mutual aid, but for them, the nearest mutual aid is 11 miles, and the next one's 12 miles in the other direction. Wow. And it's mind-boggling. But they don't have that many fires. It's mostly EMS. Like the chief told me, the last fire they had was 2.5 years ago. But they're operating at such a minimum level of response. And it scares me sometimes. And I worry about the volunteer service in general, because as the numbers of volunteers go down, then that's also less responders. And we talk about recruitment, and this is a big buzzword in the volunteer service, recruitment and retention. And I've been reading some articles, and I really agree with them that it's retention. If you keep people, they bring other people on board. If you make the people who volunteer for you, with you, want to be there, they bring people and tell them how great their organization is. If you have an overbearing, domineering chief who yells and makes people feel uncomfortable there, you don't know shit, people don't want to stay. And if they don't want to stay, people are going to ask them, oh, that place was horrible. They treated me like I was an idiot. You have to make people feel welcome. Give them a job. Put them on committees. Make training interesting. Don't drive around and do streets and hydrants every Monday night. That's not, you have to do that, but find a parking garage and train on the standpipes in the parking garage so you can practice. I know you probably don't have standpipes where you are, but
no, we have one.
Right. So, but whatever. If someone's tearing down a house, maybe you can do not live fire training, but go in and do search and rescue training, hose stretching training. Make it exciting, make it interesting. If someone has a junk car, do extrication training, make it exciting, let them learn new skills. Because if they're not excited, they're not going to stay.
No, not at all. That's an interesting, because so we meet on Tuesday night for a few hours, and it's always, we try to keep it interesting, but it's always a struggle with you have so many the state requirements or whatever. Like you got to do that. You got to
Yep.
sit through this bloodborne pathogen thing, and we try to make it a little more interesting. But and then when you break it down, there's only 50 days of training, and it's like making them. It's a challenge, but
Yep. Well, you just talked about bloodborne pathogens. Very boring subject. It's important, and you have to do it every year. One of our members, when I worked in Wallingford, got some ultraviolet liquid that you could put on, and with an ultraviolet light, you can see that you have the cooties on your skin or on your gloves or on your turnout gear. So he had a little spray bottle and he would put it on people, and so afterwards we would leave the classroom and we would start scanning people with the blue light, and you would see that they had bacteria on them. So something to make it interesting.
I'm writing that down.
Yeah, it wasn't me. It was one of our members. He did that, and it was what a great idea, because
Yeah.
this is the 26th time I've done bloodborne pathogens. It's how difficult. You can't keep people
Yeah.
excited very easily. When we did our training as a volunteer, we would stop at Carvel after we finished our training, and I would buy, as a lieutenant or a captain, whatever I was. What did it cost me? $12 to buy 8 or 9 guys an ice cream cone. It. Yeah, it was my money, and the department wasn't reimbursing me. But you know what? If I went out to a bar and bought him a beer, it would cost me more. So,
Yeah. That's fantastic.
it was.
Well, so you mentioned a little bit about the future of the fire service with retention and stuff. Where do you see the fire service, say, in 20 years?
Well, I see more combination departments. I
Mhm.
absolutely do. Much like yours, someone's got to be in charge. To be a chief officer as a volunteer is a nightmare. You got your regular job. Maybe you're a cop, maybe you're an accountant, whatever it is. But budgets, you know, all of that stuff is part of it. You wanted to be a volunteer firefighter and you became a chief and you have to run a department. I think that's difficult. For suburban departments, daytime drivers, maybe not just for one town, but I think putting a 3 or 4 man crew in the middle of 3 different little towns. Well, they're not little. Again, so say there's 20,000 people live in this town, 30,000 live, but put a company in the middle or a county department, a 4 man engine company that can immediately get on the road while the volunteers are amassing. Another thing, I think, like they do in Maryland, they have duty companies. So as a volunteer, everybody has to take maybe one night a month or one night every 2 months or something, and they bunk in the firehouse. So 4 guys will stay at a volunteer station and respond. But again, if you're only having one call a week, that's probably not worth it. But in suburban areas, they're doing, 500, 600, 700 calls a year or 1,000 calls a year. Hicksville, Long Island is in the thousands every year as a volunteer department.
Wow. How many volunteers do they have, do you think, or do you know?
Hicksville, I do not know. I know they have paid medics on duty.
So many how many volunteers did you have when you were volunteering?
When I was there, each company was limited to 50 members.
Wow.
Limited,
Okay.
and there were 3 companies. So
Wow. So what today, is it the same or has it changed?
it's still the numbers are real high, but active members becomes just like in any other volunteer department. Oh yeah, we have 100 members. How many active? Oh, 14. And I'm not saying that about Mineola, but there are places
Yeah.
I teach at and they go, oh yeah, we got a lot of members. Well, how many are active? You know,
Yeah.
and that's a different
5.
story. Right. It could be, but they had a truck company, which had 2 trucks and a rescue rig, 2 engine companies. Each of those engine companies had 2 engines. One of the engine companies was on the other side of the tracks. I don't mean anything disparaging about that being on the other side of the tracks, but their numbers are lower, and the active members are lower. There are guys that joined when I joined that are still there. People who are captains are still there. They drive the trucks now. You know, they're 72 years old. They drive the trucks and pump the trucks, and sometimes they're the best at it because they don't want to be dragging hose anymore. So they know how the pump works, and they're never going to fail you getting you water at a fire. And their experience is, you know, if you give them a chance, they'll share their experience with you. I don't care how many fire
Yeah.
schools you went to. The fires they've been to, they learned something.
Hmm. Yeah. My favorite thing, just like listening at FDIC is so on our department, I won't mention their names so they don't get, but there are 2 gentlemen, they're both former military and they're retired. And one of them is, well, okay, I'm going to give away who it is. One is our oldest member. One is, I'm guessing 10 years younger than him. I can't remember exactly how old they are, but both they both could outrace me. They could outperform me on any day. They're both just amazing people. But I love listening to the stories, and not necessarily fire stories, but there's stuff you can learn from these people, just life knowledge
Yep.
that I I look at these little kids, they're now like 16, 17, they look up to me and I'm like, well, I'm just the young guy. Look, talk to these guys because they just sit and listen. I don't know. That's one of my favorite things to do. But sorry, I digress. But okay, so I don't want to keep you too long. We talked about where the fire service is going. Let me go my little list here because I think you covered just about everything. Talked about. So is there any, so when I asked you to come on here, you probably had an assumption about what I was going to talk about. Is there anything in your brain that you think is important that maybe I didn't ask you? And it could be a million things. It could just be one thing for the volunteer combination department.
I'm going to be a little preachy.
Okay.
Put your heart into it. You're going to have bad days. You're going to have days that you don't want to do it. Be passionate, get into the job. And when I say job, being a volunteer or being on the career side, be into it. But another thing that I want to say, and you know this because FDIC and fire engineering, don't get all your training just from your department. You become inbred. You start making the same mistakes. You don't learn. Go to class. I'm not saying you have to go to 20 classes a year, but go to classes, learn different things. Different departments do things different ways. Like you said, one department. How do you stretch the hose? I learned, I'm going to give a little story that I tell in my classes all the time. If we're searching and it's a 2-man search team, one guy will have the TIC, thermal imaging camera. And when we get to a small bedroom, one of them will stay outside the bedroom with the thermal imaging camera and watch the other firefighters search. So when that room is complete, they're going to switch. The firefighter that searched the room is going to hold the camera, and the other firefighter is going to search the room. And we do that for a reason. I actually learned that from a firefighter in my class at FDIC. He said that that's what they do. It does a couple of things. It gives the first guy a break because the guy with the camera outside is not even breathing heavy. But what it does, it extends your search time, because now the guy who was searching, his breathing rate comes down and he starts breathing less air. And now the other guy works. So they both have a half a cylinder air, and I'm making up numbers. If one guy searched both rooms, say the lieutenant held the camera twice, he'd have 3/4 of the cylinder. The other guy's lower air alarm would be going off. I learned that elsewhere. I didn't learn that from my department. Practice what you know, although you don't have neighbors. But where I live in Durham, but the next town is Middlefield. They train together on a regular basis because they're going to be working together. You can't take the ferry and train with your neighbors on a regular basis. It's not possible. But go to classes, learn from people. There's lots of people out there way smarter than me that I learned from on even though I'm retired, I still listen to people. They have so much to say, so much to share. Vinnie Dunn, for example, he's written dozens of books. He's in his 80s. He's still holding court and speaking and writing on a regular basis. John Norman. I mean, I could go on and on and on. So, read. I mean, I look at the bookshelf behind you.
Yeah, there's so much. So much great stuff. I would be remiss if I didn't mention too. I don't know if you mentioned this earlier, but so Chief Duffy was involved when we met was for the Tactical Perspectives video series that we did, and it was with many amazing individuals, but Chief Duffy was in the mix, and it's an amazing video. So if anyone out there is looking for some great training, yours was a search one. We did a fire attack. We did, well, you worked on all of them, but you were the lead on the search one. And then we did fire attack. We did Mayday, ventilation. And what's the other one? I'm totally
I tell you what, I'll do it by the numbers.
Okay.
There were many people involved. Frank Ritchie was the people who got us all together. So there was command. The command one, that was the number one. Chief Villo was lead on that. PJ Norwood was lead on ventilation. Chris Pepler, God rest his soul, what a wonderful person. Smart, but a pleasure to be around. He did fire attack. It was great. It really was. We had such a wonderful time. We didn't do the actual editing, but we watched and said, okay, do this minute to this minute. That took hours and hours in Frank Ritchie's basement. But what I have to continue where you went, because you won't do this. Mark had a camera, several cameras, but we brought him into buildings that were on fire, a house that was on fire. Now, we kind of stretched the 1403 because it wasn't a training burn. It was a video burn. So we kind of played on the edge. We would sacrifice a GoPro camera. We would have a room with couches and armoires and dressers in it and leave the GoPro in there that was broadcasting out. And we'd watch the room build to flashover, and it would incinerate the camera. But the video that we got was great. Mark was in places that some firefighters I worked with have never been in. And hopefully we gave him the bug, and that's why he joined the volunteers. I don't know that, but he was having such a ball, and he was so good at what he was doing. And the way he edited it and put it together, everything, it came out in 2011. We shot it in 2010. And everything in those videos, with all the UL and all the studies, everything we spoke about, everything we showed is still valid today. I actually just posted on fire engineering training site on Facebook the intro to it, talking about search. And Chief David Rhodes did a thing about search, and I posted that little video. It's like a minute and 10 seconds talking about just that. It's your responsibility to search. It's your response. There are friends of mine who retired FDNY, and I'm not going to say where they live because they'll know who I'm talking about, where a house fire, they're setting up a deck gun on the front lawn, and it's just a living room fire. And he's like losing his mind watching this, Well, how come you didn't go in it? Well, there's fire in there. Well, what's it say on your fire truck? It says fire department. Yes, we have to be safe. Don't misunderstand me. We shouldn't be reckless and, uneducated aggressive, but we should be intelligently aggressive, and people are waiting for us. It's our responsibility. It's their only hope in some cases. So that being said, I'm on my soapbox again. Training is important. Train outside your organization and do the social stuff. One of the things in the volunteer service that I think is absolutely wonderful, we had parties for everything. We had Halloween parties. We had 50s dances. We had installation dinners every year. All the officers would get sworn in, even though it's the same officers in many cases. We'd have a dinner. We would do it in the fire hall or rent out a place where you can do it, where they actually serve you and things. Do the social stuff. Have picnics. I know you guys have clams on that island. Go steam some clams and corn on the cob and hamburgers and meet the families and be social. That will keep you together and will keep you growing. It's so important. Don't just do the work part. Be friends with your fellow. And I know you can't be friends every day, every moment, because we have different opinions, and probably political discussions in the firehouses are horrible right now. But, it's still America. We still live here no matter who's president. We're still firefighters together. And don't forget that. Don't get all pissed off because you believe in Trump or you believe in Harris. Whatever it is, it's not worth your relationships. Take care of each other and be friends. Sorry.
No, that's perfect. That's why, thank you, Chief. I'll let you go. You're absolutely the reason I volunteer today, because it's that experience it changed I always tell people my first few weeks at working at Pinwall, like the first person I worked with was John Norman, who's just an amazing person. I'm like, okay, is this the fires? I'm like, cool, this is great. And then I worked with Anthony Castros, wonderful person. But then I literally got my bags and I went to Connecticut, and I spent like a week and a half in Connecticut, just burning everything that we could find. And it changed my life. I was like, wow, this is amazing. It was just an amazing experience. So thank you. That's why I wanted you to be my first guest, because I think the world of you, and I think thank you for that experience. Thank you for your knowledge. I don't call you as much as I should, but every time I do, you've always have a fountain of wisdom.
Well,
so
now I'm getting a little senile, so don't count on the wisdom coming in. But anyway, you know what? It's always a pleasure. I enjoy our time, and thank you so much for asking me here. I have a recommendation. If you're going to continue this series, I think Tom Merrill is the guy you should get on your show. He would be so much fun to have. He's a great guy, and I keep telling him to expand, not just the professional volunteer service, the professional fire service. What he says is valid on both sides of the organization. And if you're in a combination department, please try to work together. It will make a difference on fire calls, if nothing else. But it might make your lives better too.
That's awesome. Well, thank you, Chief.
Thanks for having me.
I'm going to end. This is 85%. See you everyone next time.